Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we have talked a lot of NBA. We talked about the Nuggets taking down the Lakers in our first buzzer beater of the playoffs, and we talked about the Knicks taking down Joel Embiid and the 76ers in a nail biter down the stretch to each of those teams go up 2-0 in their series. We also finished talking just recently about the NBA Players Poll that just finished up, that came out yesterday, where The Athletic polled a bunch of players from all 30 teams in the NBA, asked them questions like who's the MVP, who's the best, who's the GOAT, who's the player you would least like to fight, and more. I recommend checking that out because we did not go through everything, and there's a lot of really great quotes in the article that you can read for yourself. But in this fourth and final segment, we are going to move into the NFL. We're going to talk a little bit about Brandon Ayuk and the potential for him to get traded. There's been rumors swirling all offseason surrounding Ayuk and places he might be able to go, hot spots like the Steelers, and what the 49ers might be able to get for him if it will happen. So rumors have been swirling. We'll break down all of that coming up in just a second, but before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. That link on the screen right there. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. You can control what we talk about here on the podcast. Again, go to that link, gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate anything that you do give. We appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and watching. But let's get right back into the show, talking about some NFL. Oops, wrong one. I apologize. Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk has been on the trade block from the 49ers basically all season. And it's not because the 49ers don't want him, not because he wants out of the 49ers, but because the 49ers are going to have to pay him, and they are going to have to allocate their resources somewhere else. They're already paying Debo. They're already paying a lot of their core. Christian McCaffrey got paid, and Brock Purdy is coming up next. So they need to save their money for that as opposed to Brandon Ayuk. So he's a little bit expendable at this point. And lots of teams are looking at getting him. There's been rumors of him going for as high as a first-round pick, and we could see something like that happen on draft day. A lot has been speculated. The Steelers are a team that, after trading away Deontay Johnson to the Panthers for a bag of bones, are in the market for a wide receiver. They're not picking high enough to get one of those top guys like Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison. Now, this is a class that is chock full of wide receiver talent. You know, you have guys that you can grab in the second round that probably would go in the first round in a lot of drafts. It's a very, very stacked receiver class, you know. But at the same time, if you can get a guy like Brandon Ayuk, who's already an established star, as opposed to taking a risk on a guy like a Xavier Worthy, who, yes, exploded the combine with a new record time in the 40, but he's got some drop issues. You don't know exactly what it's going to look like for him transitioning out of college and into the NFL. You can already have an established star in Brandon Ayuk that has shown the ability to be a deep threat, to who believes in who will put his body on the line and go block for you. It fits a scheme like the Steelers. It's a very, very good fit. You know, you get him with one of those two quarterbacks opposite George Pickens, and you get that running game going with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris behind a pretty solid offensive line. The Steelers are built similarly to the 49ers. They just don't have that same level of talent that the 49ers do have. They're kind of a 49ers light, that great defense with mediocre quarterback play and some good weapons, you know, not elite weapons like the 49ers have. Just that's really where they're lacking. And you can get a guy like Brandon Ayuk, it can make a huge difference for a team trying to compete in a really, really tough division like the Steelers are in. You know, you are in a division with 4 possible playoff teams. The Bengals, who finished last, were still above 500, are getting their quarterback back in Joe Burrow. and pairing it with most likely the final year of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase together, although maybe they'll be able to work something out with T. Higgins, and if they are able to do that, that's already one of the best receiving cores in the league. But if they can lock both of them up long term, that would be huge. You know, and then you have the Ravens, who have reigning MVP Lamar Jackson and healthy weapons. You're getting Zay Flowers, you're getting a healthy Mark Andrews. It's it's a really stacked team. They've added Derrick Henry. The defense with they brought back Justin Madubuike, who was a monster down low, and they did lose a couple key pieces. But you bring in Derrick Henry after you lose basically all of your running backs. It's good enough. I feel like that's a good enough replacement. I don't know about you. I'm a big King Henry fan. I know he's at that point where he's on that impending cliff of running back fall off, but I think he's still got some more time left in him. That he can still be an elite top tier running back for just a little bit longer, and and the Browns, who they added Jerry Jeudy, they added more wide receiver talent around Deshaun Watson. That defense with reigning defensive player of the year Myles Garrett, and the rest of that line is really really solid. You still have Amari Cooper across from Jerry Jeudy. You have some really good tight ends. And as long as they can figure out that quarterback situation, they're also in contention for the playoffs. So you need, if you're looking at all four of these rosters, the Steelers might honestly be the weakest one. And that's crazy because the Steelers have a really, really good roster on paper. But you go out and you get a wide receiver like a Brandon Ayuk, that could make a huge difference for a team that needs to be able to put up points in a division that's going to be really, really tough to win games in. They want to make that playoff run. They need to add more weapons. So I do believe that Brandon Ayuk will get traded. The Steelers are a really good spot. Depending on how much draft compensation the 49ers are looking at getting for him, you could see him traded to a team like the Giants, who most likely will draft a receiver at 6, but if they decide to go a different direction, maybe draft a quarterback there, or get some more offensive line help, or really anything, maybe they trade for Brandon Ayuk with their second round pick or something like that. Not exactly sure, again, what kind of draft compensation that the 49ers are looking for. Highly doubt that they'll trade it in division, but the Cardinals, another team that could be looking at wide receiver if they'd rather go somewhere else at 4, or they trade out of 4 with the Vikings, for example, at 11. Maybe none of those top tier receivers are there. Maybe they trade one of those picks maybe they trade maybe 23 or something to the 49ers for Brandon Ayuk. Although again, in division, it's going to be a lot tougher to get these kind of deals done. But yeah, lots of really interesting stuff going on around the NFL draft. If the 49ers do trade Brandon Ayuk, they're definitely going to take a step back on offense. I think that pairing of Debo and Brandon Ayuk is one of those really intriguing wide receiver pairs because you have a unique talent in Debo who can be really put anywhere in the field, backfield, slot, outside receiver, and he's going to take a lot of attention, and that leads excuse me, and that leads a really solid wide receiver like Brandon Ayuk on the outside with one-on-one coverage where he can really exploit it. And I think that's half of the reason why Brandon Ayuk was able to explode this last season, because he was the odd man out. He was the man that they couldn't double. And he's able to burn his one man. Christian McCaffrey is taking some bodies. George Kittle is taking some bodies, and that leaves a lot less focus on Brandon Ayuk, and which is why he was able to have this kind of season that he just had. Very impressive season, and I'm not going to chalk it up solely to that. But I'm curious to see that if this does happen, how the 49ers offense will evolve. They still have plenty of guys that can play that role. I really like Juwan Jennings. He doesn't get a lot of shine in that offense, but he routinely makes clutch plays throughout the season. He's kind of that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 kind of role, but he comes in and he makes big plays all the time for the 49ers. I'm a big fan of Juwan Jennings, and I think he deserves a bigger spot in that offense. Maybe he steps up into that Brandon Ayuk role. But I'm more curious to see how Brandon Ayuk, if he can fare well as a wide receiver 1. Because you put him in a Steelers offense like the one that they're running right now, you do have George Pickens there, but he's not going to he's not going to have that same kind of gravity as a Deebo Samuel is going to have, and Brandon Ayuk might even have more gravity than George Pickens. So you get him in there, and he would kind of act as that pseudo wide receiver 1. I'm really curious to see if he can handle that, how it's going to affect his game. Now, none of this is a done deal, but I feel like there's a very high probability that Brandon Ayuk does get traded, and all signs seem to point to the Steelers. People have been saying a number 1 pick for him, it's a first round pick, which again seems like a lot for a guy in Brandon Ayuk that I'm personally not convinced can be a number 1 option on his own. I think he really was helped out by the gravity that his teammates created in San Francisco. So, curious to see what he can do. And again, I'm not trying to say he's a bad receiver. He's a good receiver, and I think he's a really, really good wide receiver 2 to have. But as a wide receiver 1, I'm just not convinced he can fulfill that role. And the 49ers are going to be asking for wide receiver 1 compensation. I wouldn't do that. I'd probably trade a second at most for him. Maybe not even a second, because that's still a lot. But a second round pick, a day 2 pick for Brandon Ayuk is something I'd feel comfortable doing, especially if you're going to be able to pay him, after this 1 year. So look for him to be on the move, as well as other rumors circling. I don't think Justin Jefferson will get traded, but there are plenty of rumors saying he will. If the Vikings trade him and go get a quarterback at the same time, I don't even know what they're doing, because the only way that any of these quarterbacks make sense to go to Minnesota is if you can build around a guy like Justin Jefferson. They should pay that man. I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense with where the Vikings are right now for them to trade him. They're not really on a decline, but if they do, they are going to start to tailspin, because Justin Jefferson is one of those few wide receivers that can carry even a mediocre quarterback. I mean, you saw Nick Mullins was still throwing 4 touchdowns a game to pair with his 6 interceptions, in 400 yards. That's a lot to do with Justin Jefferson. He just said, screw it, Justin Jefferson is down there, we're going to throw it and hope for the best. And it worked out about 50% of the time, because Justin Jefferson is so special of a talent that he can make those catches. He can be that difference maker. But yeah, lots of stuff to think about. The draft is coming up in just a couple days, 2 days from now. We're going to have some MLB power rankings later this week. We're going to have our final mock draft come out on Thursday, the day of the draft. So stick around for that. We appreciate everybody so much for tuning in and watching today's show on today's show, Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back here same time, same place tomorrow, breaking down some more playoffs and any other piece of major breaking news that happens throughout the day. I'll see you there. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.